The dust rose like a curtain between Josephine Dalton and her sister's smiling face as the mayor of Bodie, California handed Victoria the deed to the Silver Star Saloon, and Josephine felt her entire world crumble into the desert sand beneath her boots. She stood at the back of the crowd gathered in the June heat of 1878, watching as her younger sister accepted applause for the business Josephine had spent 3 years building from an abandoned gambling hall into the most profitable establishment in town. The leather journal clutched in her hands contained every receipt, every design sketch, every supplier contract bearing her signature. But Victoria had somehow convinced their dying father to put only her name on the official document 6 months ago. And now that he was gone, there was no one left who would believe the truth. Josephine turned away from the ceremony before anyone could see the tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. At 24 years old, she had survived the journey west after their mother's death, had worked her fingers raw scrubbing floors and serving drinks while Victoria charmed customers with her pretty face and prettier lies. Every improvement to the Silver Star had come from Josephine's mind and labor. The mahogany bar shipped from San Francisco, the crystal chandeliers, the upstairs rooms decorated in deep burgundy and gold, the kitchen that served the best meals north of Sacramento, all of it had been her vision, her sweat, her savings scraped together coin by coin. She walked quickly down Main Street, past the general store and the assayer's office, past miners stumbling out of competing saloons that couldn't hold a candle to what she had created. The mountain air burned in her lungs despite the summer warmth, and she didn't stop until she reached the small cabin at the edge of town that she had shared with her father and sister. It wouldn't be hers much longer, she supposed. Victoria would find a way to take this too. Inside the dim interior, Josephine sank onto the rough wooden chair by the cold stove and finally let herself cry. She had been so careful, so meticulous with her planning. The Silver Star had started as her dream when they first arrived in Bodie in 1875. The mining town was booming with silver strikes, and men with pockets full of ore money needed somewhere to spend it. She had convinced her father to purchase the derelict building with money she had earned working as a seamstress, and she had personally overseen every aspect of its transformation. But Victoria had always been their father's favorite. Beautiful, delicate Victoria, who never lifted anything heavier than a teacup, who dabbed perfume behind her ears and smiled sweetly while Josephine hauled water and scrubbed blood from the floorboards after fights. When consumption had started eating away at their father's lungs last winter, Victoria had spent hours at his bedside, whispering poison into his ears about how she needed security, how Josephine was strong enough to take care of herself, but Victoria needed protection, how it would break her heart if she didn't have something of her own. The sound of boots on the wooden porch made Josephine's head snap up. She quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, expecting Victoria to come gloating, but the knock that came was too firm, too respectful. "Miss Dalton, it's Xander Quincy. I need a word if you have the time." Josephine froze. She knew the name. Everyone in Bodie did. Xander Quincy ran cattle through the high country and owned the largest ranch within 50 miles. He came to town once a month to sell beef to the mining camps and settle accounts. She had seen him a handful of times at the Silver Star, always sitting alone at a corner table nursing one whiskey through the evening while he watched everything with those sharp gray eyes. He paid his bills in full and never caused trouble, which was more than could be said for most customers. She opened the door slowly, and there he stood, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark brown hair slightly too long beneath his dusty hat. He couldn't have been much older than 30, with a face that was more interesting than handsome, all hard angles and sun-weathered skin, but his eyes were kind when they met hers, and she saw something there that made her straighten her spine. "Mr. Quincy, I'm afraid if you're looking for business with the Silver Star, you'll need to speak to my sister now. She apparently owns it." The bitterness in her voice was impossible to hide. "I know what she owns, and I know how she got it." His voice was deep and steady, with a Texas drawl that spoke of long distances and longer silences. "That's why I'm here. May I come in? I have something you need to see. Josephine hesitated, then stepped back to let him enter. He removed his hat as he crossed the threshold, ducking slightly beneath the doorframe. In the small cabin he seemed even larger, but he moved with surprising care as though afraid of breaking something. I don't understand, Josephine said, remaining by the door. What could you possibly have to show me? Xander reached into his vest and pulled out a folded paper. Your sister came to see me 3 weeks ago. Wanted to sell the Silver Star, lock, stock, and barrel. Said she was the owner and had built it from the ground up with her own 2 hands. He paused, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Now, I'm a cattleman, Miss Dalton, not a saloon keeper, but I pay attention to things. I've been coming to your establishment since it opened its doors, and I've never once seen your sister do anything more strenuous than pour a drink that someone else had already measured. Hope flared in Josephine's chest, painful and bright. You didn't believe her. I told her I'd think about it, and then I did some asking around. He unfolded the paper and held it out to her. I talked to the suppliers, the builders, the seamstress shop where you used to work. I talked to old Frank Murphy, who runs the freight wagons, and Sung Lee, who built your kitchen, and the glassmaker in Sacramento who shipped those fancy chandeliers. Every single one of them had the same story. Every transaction, every conversation, every decision was made by you. Your sister's name might be on the deed, but everyone in the territory knows who really built the Silver Star. Josephine took the paper with trembling hands. It was a statement signed by a dozen different business owners and workers, all testifying to her role in creating the saloon. The words blurred as fresh tears welled up, but these were different from the ones she had cried earlier. Why would you do this? She whispered. You don't even know me. Xander settled his weight, looking uncomfortable for the first time. My mother built a ranch from nothing after my father died when I was 10 years old. She worked herself half to death proving she could do it. And when she finally succeeded, my uncle tried to take it from her using legal tricks and lies. She fought him in court for 2 years before a judge finally listened to the truth. His jaw tightened. She won, but the fight nearly broke her. I swore then that if I ever saw someone trying to steal another person's work, I'd do whatever I could to stop it. This statement is helpful, but it's not legal proof, Josephine said, though she clutched the paper like a lifeline. Victoria has the deed. My father signed it over to her before he died. I know. That's why I'm going to help you get it back. Xander met her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. If you'll let me. How? Your father's lawyer is Abraham Whitfield, correct? He's the one who filed the deed transfer? Josephine nodded. Whitfield owes me money, a significant amount from a bad investment in cattle that I helped him recover from. He's also one of the most honest men I've ever met, which means if there was anything improper about how that deed got signed, he'll remember it. Xander crossed his arms over his broad chest. I propose we pay him a visit tomorrow morning and have a conversation about exactly what happened the day your father changed his will. The hope that had flickered to life was now burning steady and strong. You think my father might not have been in his right mind when he signed? I think a man dying of consumption is often not thinking clearly, especially if he's being given morphine for the pain, and I think Victoria is exactly the type of person who would take advantage of that. His expression hardened. I've known women like your sister before. They smile pretty and act helpless, but underneath they're calculating every angle. She made a mistake coming to me, though she showed her hand too early. She's planning to sell the Silver Star? The betrayal cut even deeper than Josephine had imagined. She's going to destroy everything I built? Not if we stop her first. Xander placed his hat back on his head. I'll call for you at 8 tomorrow morning. Wear your best dress and bring any documents you have showing your work on the saloon. We're going to make Abraham Whitfield remember the truth, and then we're going to make sure everyone in Bodie knows what your sister really is. After he left, Josephine sat in the growing darkness of the cabin, reading and rereading the testimonial statements Xander had collected. The fact that he had done this, that he had taken the time to track down every person involved in building the Silver Star and document their accounts, meant more than she could express. She had felt so alone, so helpless, and now suddenly she had an ally. An unexpected, determined ally who seemed to genuinely care about justice. She spent the evening going through her leather journal, organizing receipts and correspondence into chronological order. Every purchase order, every design sketch, every notation about suppliers and shipments was there in her own handwriting. She had been meticulous because running a successful business required attention to detail, but now that careful record-keeping might save her. Victoria didn't return to the cabin that night. She was probably celebrating at the Silver Star, accepting congratulations and free drinks from people who didn't know they were toasting a liar. Josephine tried not to think about it as she laid out her navy blue dress, the nicest one she owned, and attempted to sleep. She was awake before dawn, too anxious to rest. By the time Xander knocked at 8, she was ready, her hair pinned neatly and her documents secured in a leather satchel. He was driving a wagon with 2 horses, and he helped her up to the seat with a strong, calloused hand that was warm against hers. "You look determined," he said, as they started down the road toward the center of town. "I am. This is my last chance." She glanced at him, taking in the clean shirt and vest he wore, clearly his town clothes rather than ranch wear. "Thank you again for doing this. I know you have your own business to attend to." "The ranch can spare me for a day." He guided the horses with easy skill. "Besides, I have a vested interest in making sure justice gets served, and I meant what I said yesterday. What your sister is doing, it's not right." Abraham Whitfield's office was above the bank, a small room with law books lining the walls and a desk buried under papers. The lawyer himself was a thin man in his 50s with spectacles and an air of permanent worry. His expression grew even more concerned when he saw Xander and Josephine enter together. "Mr. Quincy, Miss Dalton, this is unexpected." He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "How can I help you?" Xander remained standing, and his presence seemed to fill the small office. "We need to talk about Samuel Dalton's will and the transfer of the Silver Star deed to Victoria Dalton." Whitfield's face went carefully blank. "That's confidential legal business." "I'm Samuel's daughter," Josephine said, leaning forward. "I have a right to know what happened. Mr. Whitfield, you've known me for 3 years. You know I was the one running the Silver Star. Why would my father suddenly cut me out entirely?" The lawyer removed his spectacles and cleaned them with a handkerchief, a gesture that seemed designed to buy time. "Your father made his wishes clear. He wanted Victoria to have security." "Did he?" Xander's voice was quiet but carried an edge. Or did Victoria convince him of that while he was dying and dosed with morphine? Because I'm having trouble believing Samuel Dalton would disinherit the daughter who built a successful business in favor of the one who never worked a day in her life. "Mr. Quincy, I understand you're trying to help, but the law is the law. The deed was properly transferred and filed. There's nothing to be done about it now." Even if Samuel wasn't in his right mind when he signed, even if he was manipulated? Josephine pulled her journal from her satchel and set it on the desk with a heavy thud. "This contains 3 years of records proving I built the Silver Star. I have testimonial statements from every supplier and contractor involved, and I'm asking you as an honest man to tell me the truth about what happened in this office 6 months ago." Whitfield stared at the journal for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with something that might have been guilt. "Your father was very ill that day. I should have postponed the meeting, but Victoria insisted it couldn't wait. She said he might not have another lucid moment." He put his spectacles back on and met Josephine's eyes. He signed the papers, but he was confused. He kept asking if you would be taken care of, and Victoria assured him you would be. She said the 2 of you had an agreement, that you wanted her to have the saloon because you were planning to marry and move away. "That was a lie." Josephine's hands clenched into fists. "I never said any such thing. I wasn't courting anyone, and I had no plans to leave Bodie." "I suspected as much," Whitfield admitted. "But by the time I realized Victoria might have misrepresented the situation, your father had passed away. The deed was already filed. I considered raising a challenge, but without proof that he was mentally incapacitated at the time of signing, I had no legal grounds." Xander placed both hands flat on the desk, leaning in. "But you were there. You witnessed his state of mind. You can testify that he wasn't capable of making that decision. I could, but it would be my word against Victoria's, and she would simply say he was in pain but lucid. It becomes a matter of interpretation. The lawyer looked genuinely distressed now. Miss Dalton, I am sorry. If I had been more careful, more suspicious, I might have prevented this. You can still help, Josephine said urgently. You can testify to what you saw. Combined with all this evidence of my work on the Silver Star, it might be enough to challenge the deed transfer. It would require going before a judge, and the nearest circuit court won't be back in Bodie for 2 months. In the meantime, Victoria is the legal owner. She could sell the property before any challenge could be heard. Whitfield picked up Josephine's journal and flipped through a few pages. This is impressive documentation. You're clearly a capable businesswoman, but I'm afraid the law doesn't always favor the deserving party. Xander straightened, his expression thoughtful. What if we could prove Victoria obtained the deed through fraud? That would invalidate the transfer immediately, wouldn't it? Yes, but you would need clear evidence of fraudulent intent. Simply taking advantage of a dying man's confusion while morally reprehensible isn't necessarily fraud in the legal sense. Whitfield looked between them. Unless you have proof that she deliberately lied or forged documents. She told my father I wanted to give her the saloon, Josephine said. That's fraud, isn't it? She intentionally misrepresented my wishes. It could be argued that way, but again, it's her word against a dead man's memory. You would need a witness who heard her make false statements or documentation showing she planned the deception. The lawyer's expression was sympathetic but not hopeful. I want to help you, Miss Dalton. I truly do. But I don't see a clear legal path forward. They left the office with Josephine feeling more defeated than before. The hope that had burned so bright the previous day was dimming in the harsh light of legal reality. Xander helped her back into the wagon, and they sat there for a moment in silence. I should have seen it coming, Josephine finally said. I knew Victoria was jealous of my relationship with Father toward the end, when he started praising the success of the saloon. I knew she was spending more time with him, keeping me away with excuses about him needing rest. But I never imagined she would do something like this. That's because you're not a liar yourself. You don't think like she does. Xander gathered the reins but didn't signal the horses to move yet. We're not done fighting. Whitfield said we need proof of fraud, so we'll find it. How? Victoria isn't going to confess. No, but she's planning to sell the Silver Star, which means she's been talking to potential buyers. She must have made claims about the business, about the profits, about her role in building it. If we can catch her in a lie to someone else, that could be the evidence we need. His jaw was set with determination. I told her I was considering buying the saloon. I'll arrange another meeting with her, and this time I'll bring witnesses. If she repeats the same lies about building the business herself, we'll have testimony of fraud. Josephine looked at him. This cowboy who had inserted himself into her troubles for no reason other than a sense of justice. Why are you doing all this? The time, the effort, you barely know me. Xander turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her heart skip. Maybe I want to know you better, and maybe I'm tired of watching good people get trampled by those who are willing to cheat. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. I've been coming to the Silver Star for 3 years, Miss Dalton. I've watched you work, watched you handle drunks and difficult customers with grace, watched you turn that place into something special. I admire that. I admire you. Heat rose in Josephine's cheeks, and she found herself unable to look away from him. There was something in his gaze that went beyond admiration, something deeper and more complicated. I didn't think anyone noticed. I noticed. His voice was rough. I've been noticing you since the first time I walked through those doors and saw you standing behind the bar, tallying receipts with ink on your fingers and determination in your eyes. You didn't smile pretty and flutter your lashes like the other girls. You just did the work that needed doing, and you did it well. The air between them felt charged with something Josephine didn't quite have a name for. She had been so focused on survival, on building her business, that she had never allowed herself to think about courtship or romance. There had been men who showed interest, but she had always turned them away, convinced they only wanted the saloon or a pretty face to hang on their arm. But Xander was different. He had seen the real her, the capable and driven woman beneath the dust and exhaustion, and he had chosen to stand beside her. "I should get you back home," Xander said, though he seemed reluctant to break the moment. "I need to make arrangements for this meeting with Victoria. The more official I can make it seem, the better. I'll bring my ranch foreman and maybe Whitfield himself if he's willing." "Do you think it will work?" "I think Victoria is arrogant enough to believe her lies are untouchable. That arrogance will be her downfall." He finally urged the horses forward, and they began the journey back to Josephine's cabin. "In the meantime, I want you to stay away from her. Don't confront her, don't argue, don't give her any warning that we're building a case. Let her think she's won." It was harder advice to follow than Josephine expected. That evening, Victoria returned to the cabin in a swirl of expensive perfume and silk skirts, both of which had certainly been purchased with money from the Silver Star. She was humming as she entered, and the sound made Josephine's teeth clench. "Oh, you're still here," Victoria said, pausing in the doorway. "I assumed you would have moved out by now." "This is my home," Josephine replied evenly, keeping her gaze on the beans she was stirring over the stove. "Father left the cabin to both of us. Actually, he left everything to me. The cabin, the saloon, all of it. You'll find that out soon enough when Whitfield files the complete will." Victoria moved to the small mirror on the wall and began unpinning her elaborate hairstyle. "But I'm not cruel. You can stay here for another week while you figure out where you're going." "How generous of you." The words came out sharper than Josephine intended, but she couldn't help it. Victoria turned, her pretty face arranged in an expression of false sympathy. "You're angry, I understand. But you have to see this from Father's perspective. He knew I needed looking after, and you, well, you're so capable. You'll land on your feet somewhere. Maybe you could go back to sewing or find a husband who needs a sturdy wife." The insult was clear, and it took all of Josephine's self-control not to throw the pot of beans at her sister's head. "And what will you do with the Silver Star? You've never run it a day in your life." "I'll hire someone to manage it, obviously, or perhaps I'll sell it. I've had several very generous offers already." Victoria smiled, and there was something cold in her eyes. "You should have been smarter, Josie. You did all the work, but I made sure the rewards would be mine. That's the difference between us. I think ahead." Josephine turned back to the stove before Victoria could see the fury in her expression. She thought of Xander's words, his insistence that she not reveal their plans. So she simply said, "You're right. You're much cleverer than I am." The false humility seemed to satisfy Victoria, who returned to admiring herself in the mirror. "I'm glad you're finally accepting reality. It will make things easier for both of us." That night, lying on her narrow bed while Victoria snored delicately across the room, Josephine stared at the ceiling and imagined all the ways she wanted to expose her sister's lies. But more than revenge, she wanted justice. She wanted everyone to know the truth, wanted her name restored to the business she had built, wanted the recognition she had earned through years of hard work. And somewhere beneath all that, she couldn't stop thinking about Xander's words, the way he had looked at her, the quiet intensity in his voice when he said he had been noticing her. She had been so focused on survival that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen as a woman rather than just a worker. The memory of his hand on hers as he helped her into the wagon, the warmth of his presence beside her, the solid strength he represented, all of it made her feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. 2 days later, Xander sent word that he had arranged a meeting with Victoria at the Silver Star. He planned to bring his foreman, Marcus Webb, and the assayer Thomas Crawford as witnesses. He also convinced Abraham Whitfield to attend as his legal counsel, lending official weight to the proceedings. Josephine was to wait at the cabin until they had finished. Then Xander would bring her the results. The waiting was torture. She paced the small cabin, unable to sit still, jumping at every sound outside. When Xander finally knocked on her door 3 hours later, she nearly tore it off its hinges getting it open. Well, she demanded. His expression was grim but satisfied. She lied, repeatedly and with witnesses present. She claimed she personally designed every aspect of the Silver Star, negotiated with all the suppliers, chose the furnishings, even said she drew up the architectural plans for the kitchen expansion. He stepped inside, and Josephine saw Marcus Webb and Abraham Whitfield behind him. She was very convincing, very detailed. The problem for her is that we have testimony from all those suppliers saying they only ever dealt with you. Whitfield moved forward, his thin face animated with something that looked like relief. It's exactly what we needed, Miss Dalton. Victoria made specific claims that can be proven false. She committed fraud, both in obtaining the deed and in attempting to sell the property under false pretenses. I'm filing a motion to invalidate the deed transfer immediately. Will it work? Josephine hardly dared to breathe. Judge Hartley is in town hearing mining claims. I've already sent a request for an emergency hearing tomorrow morning. Given the severity of the fraud and the risk of Victoria selling the property before you could challenge it, I believe he'll agree to see us. The lawyer actually smiled, a rare expression on his worried face. We have her, Miss Dalton. We finally have her. The hearing took place in the town hall, a large room that served as both courthouse and community meeting space. Judge Hartley was an older man with iron gray hair and a reputation for no-nonsense justice. Victoria arrived dressed in a pale yellow dress that made her look innocent and young, her eyes wide with what Josephine recognized as practiced confusion. I don't understand what this is about, Victoria said, her voice trembling slightly. Mr. Quincy wanted to buy the saloon, and I simply provided information about the business. Why am I being accused of fraud? Whitfield stood and presented his case with careful precision. He called Xander first, who testified about the statements Victoria had made regarding her role in building the Silver Star. Then came Marcus Webb and Thomas Crawford, who corroborated every word. Whitfield then presented the testimonial statements from suppliers and contractors, all swearing that Josephine had been their sole contact and decision-maker. Miss Victoria Dalton claimed to have personally drawn up architectural plan, and Whitfield said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. But the actual architect, Sung Lee, testified that he worked exclusively with Miss Josephine Dalton and that Victoria never once visited the construction site. Victoria's lawyer, a slick man named Porter, who had probably been hired with Silver Star money, tried to argue that his client had simply been mistaken about details, that she had been involved in the business even if she hadn't personally handled every transaction. But when Whitfield presented Josephine's journal with 3 years of meticulous records, the argument fell apart. Judge Hartley examined the journal carefully, reading through pages of receipts and notes. This is impressive documentation, Miss Dalton, he said, looking at Josephine. You kept very careful records. I had to, Your Honor. Running a successful business requires knowing exactly where every penny goes. Josephine's voice was steady, though her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. The Silver Star was my dream, my work, my investment of time and money and effort. My sister never showed any interest in it until it became profitable. That's not true, Victoria's composure finally cracked. I helped. I greeted customers and made them feel welcome. The saloon wouldn't have succeeded without me. Is that why you told our dying father that I wanted to give you the business? Josephine stood, unable to contain herself any longer. Is that why you lied about me planning to leave town? You manipulated him when he was at his weakest because you couldn't stand that I had built something on my own. He wanted me to be taken care of. Victoria's pretty face twisted with genuine anger now. You were always his favorite, always so capable and independent. I needed security, and you already had skills. You could do anything. I only had my looks, and those don't last forever. The admission hung in the air, and Josephine saw several people in the courtroom react with shock. Victoria seemed to realize what she had said, and her hand flew to her mouth, but it was too late. Judge Hartley set down the journal with a heavy thud. Miss Victoria Dalton, you have admitted to obtaining property through deliberate deception. You lied to your father about your sister's intentions, you lied to potential buyers about your role in the business, and you attempted to profit from another person's work through fraudulent means. His expression was stern, The deed transfer is hereby declared invalid. The Silver Star Saloon is returned to its rightful owner, Miss Josephine Dalton. The relief that flooded through Josephine was so intense it made her dizzy. She felt Xander's steadying hand on her elbow and looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "You did it," he said quietly. "You got your business back." But the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I am ordering that Victoria Dalton pay restitution to her sister for any profits taken from the Silver Star during the 6 months she falsely claimed ownership. Miss Josephine Dalton, you are also granted sole ownership of the family cabin, as it's clear your father was not in sound mind when making his final arrangements." He banged his gavel. "This case is closed." Victoria was escorted from the courtroom by her lawyer, her face blotchy with tears and rage. She cast one venomous look back at Josephine, but there was defeat in her eyes. She had gambled everything on her lies and lost. Outside in the bright summer sunshine, Josephine stood on the wooden sidewalk and simply breathed. The Silver Star was hers again. Legally, officially, undeniably hers. All the work she had done, all the sacrifices she had made, they hadn't been for nothing. "I don't know how to thank you," she said to Xander, who stood beside her while Whitfield and the others dispersed to their own business. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have," he corrected gently. "You had all the documentation, all the proof. You just needed someone to help you see the path forward." He tilted his head, studying her. "What will you do now?" "Run my saloon, make it even better than it was before." She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "And maybe take a day off for the first time in 3 years. If you do, I'd like to show you something." Xander looked uncharacteristically uncertain. "My ranch. It's about 2 hours' ride into the high country, beautiful land with meadows and pine forests. I think you'd appreciate it, seeing as you have an eye for building something from nothing." Josephine understood what he was really asking, and the flutter in her chest had nothing to do with nerves. "I'd like that very much." They arranged for him to call on her the following Sunday, giving Josephine time to sort out affairs at the Silver Star and begin the process of truly reclaiming her business. The first thing she did was change the locks, just in case Victoria had any ideas about causing trouble. The second was to gather her staff and explain what had happened. The reaction was overwhelmingly supportive. Her bartender, a gruff man named Samuel, actually teared up. "We all knew it was you who built this place, Miss Dalton. We were sick about what your sister did. It's good to have you back where you belong." The cook, Margaret, hugged her fiercely. "That girl never set foot in my kitchen the whole time she claimed to own it. She didn't even know we'd expanded the menu to include roast beef on Sundays. Good riddance to her." Working at the Silver Star again felt like coming home. Josephine moved through the familiar spaces, checking inventory and reviewing accounts, and felt peace settle over her. This was where she belonged, surrounded by the business she had created, serving customers who appreciated good food and honest service. Sunday arrived warm and clear, perfect weather for riding into the mountains. Xander appeared at her door with 2 horses, one of them a gentle mare with a glossy chestnut coat. "Her name is Sadie," he said, handing Josephine the reins. "She's good-tempered and sure-footed. The trail can be a bit rough in places." Josephine hadn't ridden much since arriving in California, but the skill came back quickly. They left Bodie behind, following a narrow trail that wound up through rocky hills dotted with scrub brush and wildflowers. As they climbed higher, the landscape changed. Pine trees appeared, their scent sharp and clean in the thin air. Meadows opened up, carpeted in grass and colorful blooms that attracted butterflies and bees. "It's beautiful," Josephine said, genuinely awed. "I've never been up this high." "Most people stay in town or near the mines. They miss all this." Xander gestured to the sweeping vista around them. "My ranch is just beyond that ridge. 10,000 acres of good grazing land with water year-round from snowmelt. I run about 500 head of cattle, with room to expand if I wanted to." They crested the ridge, and Josephine caught her breath. The valley below was everything Xander had described and more. A ranch house sat nestled against a grove of pines built from logs and stone with a wide porch that looked out over the meadows. Cattle grazed peacefully in the distance, and she could see outbuildings and corrals, all well maintained and organized. "You built this yourself?" she asked. "With help from a crew, but yes. I designed it, chose the location, oversaw every aspect of construction. Took me 5 years to get it to where it is now." He glanced at her. "That's why I understood what it meant when Victoria tried to take credit for your work. I know what it's like to pour yourself into creating something." They rode down to the ranch, and Xander showed her around with obvious pride. The house was comfortable and practical, with large windows that let in natural light and a stone fireplace big enough to heat the main room in winter. The kitchen was spacious, and Josephine found herself imagining ways it could be improved, then laughed at herself for the instinct. "What's funny?" Xander asked. "I can't help it. I see a space and immediately start thinking about how to make it more efficient." She ran her hand along the wooden counter. You need better workspace here and storage shelves along that wall." "Feel free to make suggestions. I built this place for function, not beauty. I never had anyone to make it nice for." The implication in his words was clear, and when Josephine turned to look at him, she found him watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "Xander," she started, but he closed the distance between them before she could finish. "I meant what I said before. I've been noticing you for 3 years, Josephine, watching you work, admiring your strength and determination. When I saw your sister trying to steal everything you'd built, I couldn't stand by and let it happen." His hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palm. "But it wasn't just about justice. I wanted you to look at me the way you're looking at me right now." "How am I looking at you?" Her voice came out breathless. "Like maybe you've been noticing me too." She had been, she realized, all those evenings when he sat in the corner of the Silver Star, nursing his whiskey and watching everything with those gray eyes. She had been aware of him, of his quiet presence, and the way he treated her staff with respect. She had noticed the strength in his hands and the way he moved with easy confidence. She had just been too busy surviving to let herself think about what that awareness meant. "I have been," she admitted, "but I thought you were just another customer." "I was never just a customer." He leaned closer, and she could smell leather and pine, and something uniquely him. "I was a man trying to figure out how to talk to a woman who seemed completely out of his reach." "I'm not out of your reach." She closed the remaining distance between them and kissed him. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be, tentative and seeking, a question and an answer all at once. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted against him, feeling safe and wanted in a way she had never experienced before. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xander rested his forehead against hers. "Stay for dinner," he said. "Stay and let me court you properly. I want to do this right." "I'd like that." She smiled, feeling happiness bubble up inside her. "Though I should warn you, I'm very particular about how things are done." "I've noticed. It's one of the things I love about you." He froze, as if realizing what he had just said. "I mean, one of the things I admire. I didn't mean to say love. That's too fast. We barely know each other. I just meant—" Josephine stopped his rambling with another kiss. "I know what you meant. And for the record, I think I could love you too. Given time." They spent the rest of the day at the ranch, and Xander cooked dinner over the fireplace, a simple meal of steak and potatoes that tasted better than anything Josephine had eaten in months. They talked as the sun set, sharing stories about their lives. She learned that he had been born in Texas, that his mother's fight to keep the ranch had shaped his views on justice and fairness, that he had come west looking for new opportunities and found them in the California high country. He learned about her childhood, about losing her mother and taking on adult responsibilities too young, about the dream of building something of her own that had driven her to create the Silver Star. They talked about books and music, about the challenges of running a business, about what they wanted from life. "I want stability," Josephine said, looking out at the darkening valley. "I want to know that what I build won't be taken away. I want to be able to trust that the people around me are honest. I can give you that." Xander's hand found hers in the dimness. I'm not a fancy man, Josephine. I don't have much beyond this ranch and the cattle. But I'm honest, and I work hard, and I will never let anyone hurt you the way your sister did." "That's more than enough." She squeezed his hand. "I don't need fancy. I need real." He rode back to Bodie with her as the stars came out, unwilling to let her make the journey alone in the dark. At her cabin door, he kissed her goodnight with a tenderness that made her ache. "Can I see you again soon?" he asked. "I'll be at the Silver Star every day. You know where to find me." "I do, and I will." Over the following weeks, Xander became a regular fixture in Josephine's life. He came to town more often, always stopping by the Silver Star to share a meal and talk with her during quiet moments. He helped her implement some improvements to the saloon, using his experience with construction to shore up a weak beam and repair the roof where it had been leaking. They went on more rides into the high country, and Josephine began to love the ranch almost as much as she loved her saloon. Victoria, meanwhile, left Bodie in disgrace. Unable to face the judgment of townspeople who now knew the truth about her lies, she took what little money she had and caught a stage heading south. Josephine felt a complicated mix of relief and sadness when she heard the news. Despite everything, Victoria was still her sister, and part of her grieved the relationship they might have had if Victoria had been different. "You're better off without her," Xander said when Josephine confessed these feelings. "She would have kept trying to undermine you. Some people can't stand to see others succeed. I know, but we're all the family each other has left. Then maybe it's time to build a new family." He said it casually, but there was weight behind the words. They were sitting on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and gold. Josephine turned to look at him and saw nervousness and hope warring in his expression. "What are you saying?" she asked softly. "I'm saying I love you. I've loved you since long before I ever spoke to you, but these past weeks have only made me more certain." He took her hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "I know it's fast. I know you have your business to think about, but I want you to marry me, Josephine. I want to build a life with you, here on this ranch and in Bodie with your saloon. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want everything." Tears pricked at Josephine's eyes, but they were good tears this time. "I love you too," she whispered. "I didn't think I had room in my life for love, but you made room. You showed me that I could have both, the business and the person, the independence and the partnership." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." She laughed as he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with joyous abandon. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it." They were married in October of 1878, a small ceremony at the ranch with only close friends in attendance. Josephine wore a cream-colored dress she had made herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Xander wore a black suit that made him look uncomfortable, but devastatingly handsome. Abraham Whitfield officiated, and Marcus Webb stood as best man while Margaret from the Silver Star served as Josephine's attendant. The ranch became their primary home, but they kept the cabin in Bodie for nights when Josephine needed to work late at the saloon. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, with Josephine managing the Silver Star during busy periods and spending long stretches at the ranch when business was slower. Xander hired a foreman to handle day-to-day operations of the cattle, freeing him up to split his time between ranching and supporting Josephine's work. It was a partnership in the truest sense, each of them bringing their strengths to the relationship. When the Silver Star needed expansion, Xander helped plan and build a second story with additional rooms for overnight guests. When the ranch faced a hard winter, Josephine used profits from the saloon to buy feed for the cattle. They made decisions together, respected each other's expertise, and never once did Xander try to take credit for Josephine's accomplishments or diminish her role in either business. By the summer of 1879, Josephine discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a mix of excitement and fear. She had never imagined herself as a mother, too focused on survival and success to think about children. But with Xander, everything felt possible. "We're going to have a baby," she told him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the cattle graze. The expression on his face was pure wonder. "A baby, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be. Margaret says I have all the signs." She placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "I'm terrified. What if I'm not good at this? I know how to run a business, but raising a child?" "You'll be amazing," Xander said firmly, kneeling beside her chair and covering her hand with his. "You're capable of anything you set your mind to, and you won't be doing it alone. We're a team, remember?" "A team," she repeated, feeling some of the fear ease. "I like that." Their son was born in March of 1880, during a late snowstorm that made getting the doctor to the ranch an adventure. But the baby arrived healthy and squalling, with a head full of dark hair and his father's gray eyes. They named him Samuel, after Josephine's father, and she cried when she held him for the first time, overwhelmed by the fierce love she felt. "He's perfect," Xander whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "You're perfect. I'm the luckiest man alive." Motherhood was harder than Josephine expected, but also more rewarding. She learned to balance her work at the Silver Star with caring for Samuel, bringing him to town in a basket when he was tiny, and later leaving him with Margaret when she needed to handle business. Xander was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with a colicky baby without complaint. "This is harder than ranching," he joked one sleepless night as Samuel wailed for no apparent reason. "Welcome to my world," Josephine said, but she was smiling. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Eleanor, and the family felt complete. The Silver Star continued to thrive, becoming famous throughout the region for excellent food and honest dealing. Josephine expanded the menu and added entertainment on weekends, bringing in musicians from San Francisco. The ranch grew as well, with Xander increasing the herd and improving the breeding stock. In 1883, a reporter from the Sacramento newspaper came to write a story about successful businesses in the mining regions. He interviewed Josephine at length, fascinated by the story of a woman who had built a profitable saloon from nothing and fought to reclaim it from fraud. The article, when it published, brought customers from as far away as Nevada, all wanting to see the famous Silver Star and meet the determined woman who ran it. Victoria's name was mentioned in the article, but only as a cautionary tale about fraud and family betrayal. Josephine had moved beyond anger by then, settling into a kind of sad acceptance. She heard occasionally about her sister, who had married a merchant in San Diego and seemed to be living a respectable, if unremarkable, life. They never reconciled, and Josephine made peace with that. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged, and that was all right. What mattered was the family she had built with Xander. Their children grew up healthy and happy, splitting time between the ranch and Bodie, learning both the cattle business and the intricacies of running a saloon. Samuel showed an early aptitude for numbers and helped his mother with the books by the time he was 10. Eleanor had her father's quiet determination and could ride a horse almost before she could walk. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Xander surprised Josephine with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with Marcus Webb and his wife and spent a week exploring the city. They attended the theater, ate in fancy restaurants, and walked along the waterfront holding hands like young sweethearts. "Do you ever regret it?" Xander asked one evening as they watched the sunset over the bay. "The fighting, the struggle, the work? You could have just let Victoria have the saloon and started over somewhere else." "Never," Josephine said without hesitation. "That business was mine. I built it with my own hands and my own mind, and I deserve to keep it. Fighting for what's yours isn't something to regret." She turned to face him, cupping his strong jaw in her hand. "Besides, if I hadn't fought, you might never have noticed me." "I always noticed you," he corrected, turning his head to kiss her palm. "But you're right, I might never have had the courage to speak to you. I should thank Victoria in a twisted way. Her fraud gave me the excuse I needed to insert myself into your life. I'm glad you did." Josephine leaned against him, feeling contentment settle deep in her bones. "I used to think I could only be one thing, either a businesswoman or a wife and mother. You showed me I could be everything." "You always were everything. I just made sure the world saw it too." They returned to Bodie refreshed and more in love than ever. The Silver Star celebrated its 15th anniversary in 1890, marking the occasion with a huge party that brought people from all over the territory. Josephine stood behind her beautiful mahogany bar, now polished by years of use, and looked around at the business she had built and reclaimed and nurtured into something even better than her original dream. Xander was at a table with the children. Samuel, now a serious young man of 11, and Eleanor, a spirited 9-year-old, who was currently trying to convince her father to let her have a sip of his beer. Margaret was in the kitchen preparing food for the crowd, and the musicians were tuning their instruments on the small stage Josephine had added 5 years ago. Abraham Whitfield approached the bar with a glass raised. "To Josephine Quincy, the most determined woman I've ever met. May the Silver Star shine for another 15 years. Hear, hear!" The crowd echoed the toast, and Josephine felt tears sting her eyes. Later, after the party had wound down and the last customers had stumbled home, Josephine and Xander walked back to their cabin through the quiet streets of Bodie. The children were already asleep, carried home earlier by Marcus Webb. Stars blazed overhead in the clear mountain air, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "I was thinking," Xander said, his arm around Josephine's waist, "maybe it's time to build a bigger house at the ranch. The cabin is getting cramped with 2 growing children, and I'd like proper separate bedrooms for them, plus a bigger kitchen for you to experiment in." "That sounds wonderful," Josephine agreed. "And maybe we could add a study where Samuel could do his schoolwork and a barn closer to the house for Eleanor's horses." They spent the walk home planning and dreaming, the way they had done for over a decade now. Building things together, improving what they had, always moving forward. It was this partnership, this deep respect and love that made everything else possible. By 1895, the new ranch house was complete, a sprawling structure with rooms for the whole family and space to grow. Samuel was preparing to go to business school in San Francisco, planning to return and help expand both the ranch and the saloon. Eleanor showed no interest in leaving at all, perfectly content to work with the horses and cattle alongside her father. The Silver Star had weathered the decline of Bodie's mining boom by adapting. As the population shrank, Josephine shifted her focus to quality over quantity, making the saloon a destination rather than just a local drinking establishment. People traveled for miles to taste Margaret's cooking and enjoy the refined atmosphere that was rare in mining towns. Josephine was 41 now, with streaks of silver in her dark hair and lines around her eyes from years of squinting against the desert sun. Xander was 47, his brown hair more gray than not, his face weathered and handsome. They had built an empire together, modest by some standards, but theirs in every way that mattered. One evening in late spring, they sat on the porch of their ranch house watching the sunset paint the mountains. The same view they had watched countless times before, but it never got old. Eleanor was in the barn tending to a mare that was about to foal, and Samuel's latest letter from San Francisco sat on the table between them, full of excitement about his studies. "Do you remember that day you knocked on my cabin door?" Josephine asked, her hand in Xander's. "When you showed me those testimonial statements and said you were going to help me get my business back?" "Of course." You answered the door with tears on your face and fire in your eyes. "I knew right then I was going to do everything in my power to help you." He squeezed her hand. "Best decision I ever made. It changed everything. You changed everything." She turned to look at him. This man who had stood beside her through fights and triumphs, who had helped her reclaim what was stolen and build something even better. I was so focused on surviving, on proving myself, that I had forgotten I could actually live. You reminded me. "You did the same for me," Xander said softly. "I was just going through motions before you. Building the ranch, running cattle, existing but not really living. Then I saw you behind that bar. Determination in every line of your body. And I thought maybe there was more to life than just surviving." Eleanor emerged from the barn, waving excitedly. "She's having the foal. Papa, Mama, come see." They went, hand in hand, to witness the birth of a new colt under the stars. It was a good metaphor, Josephine thought, for their life together. Always growing, always moving forward, always building something new from the foundation they had created. The years continued to pass with the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. Samuel returned from San Francisco with a degree and a wife, a smart young woman named Catherine who took to ranch life with enthusiasm. They settled in Bodie and took over much of the daily management of the Silver Star, implementing new ideas while respecting the foundation Josephine had built. Eleanor married Marcus Webb's son, a cowboy named Daniel, who worked on the ranch alongside Xander. They built a house on the far edge of the property and started their own family. Josephine and Xander became grandparents, watching with joy as a new generation of children ran through the meadows and learned the family businesses. In 1905, on their 27th wedding anniversary, Xander and Josephine sat in the same spot where he had proposed all those years ago. They were 61 and 67 respectively, with aching joints and slower movements, but the love between them had only deepened with time. "I've been thinking," Xander said, his arm around Josephine's shoulders, "maybe it's time to step back a bit. Let Samuel and Catherine run the Silver Star full time. Let Eleanor and Daniel take over the ranch. We've earned some rest." "Are you saying you want to retire?" Josephine teased. "The great Xander Quincy giving up work?" "I'm saying I want to spend my days with my wife without worrying about cattle prices or saloon inventory. I want to travel a bit. See some of the country we never had time to visit. I want to spoil our grandchildren and sit on this porch watching sunsets until we're too old to walk." He kissed her temple. "I want to enjoy the life we built together." "That sounds perfect," Josephine agreed, "though I reserve the right to meddle if I think Samuel is making a mistake with the saloon." "I wouldn't expect anything less." They did retire, though not completely. Josephine still visited the Silver Star regularly, offering advice and occasionally taking over the bar when nostalgia struck. Xander still rode out to check on the cattle, unable to fully let go of the ranch he had built. But they also traveled, visiting San Francisco and Sacramento, and even taking a train journey to see the Grand Canyon. Through it all, they remained partners in the truest sense. When Josephine's hips started causing her pain, Xander was there to help her upstairs and hold her hand through the bad days. When Xander caught pneumonia one harsh winter, Josephine nursed him back to health with fierce determination, refusing to let him give up. "You saved me once," she told him as he recovered. "I'm not letting you go now." "I didn't save you," he corrected weakly. "I just helped you save yourself." "Same thing." By 1915, Bodie was nearly a ghost town. Most of the mines played out and the population dwindled to a fraction of its peak. But the Silver Star still stood, now run by Samuel's eldest son, and the ranch thrived under Eleanor and Daniel's management. The Quincy family had become an institution in the region, known for honest dealing and hard work. Josephine was 71 now, her hair completely white, but her mind still sharp. She sat on the porch of the ranch house, a blanket over her lap despite the summer warmth, and watched the grandchildren play in the meadow. Xander sat beside her, 77 and moving slowly but still steady. His hand found hers the way it had thousands of times over nearly 4 decades together. "No regrets?" he asked, the question that had become a tradition between them. "Not a single one," Josephine answered, squeezing his weathered hand. "You made sure the truth came out. You gave me back my business and my dignity, but more than that, you gave me a life I never dreamed possible." "We gave each other that life," Xander corrected. "Every good thing I have came from knowing you." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had fought and built and loved their way through decades of life. The Silver Star still shone in Bodie, a testament to Josephine's determination and vision. The ranch spread out around them, thousands of acres of productive land carved from wilderness, and their family, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the values they had instilled through work and honesty and love. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Josephine leaned her head on Xander's shoulder and thought about that desperate day so long ago when Victoria had stolen everything. She thought about the cowboy who had knocked on her door with testimonial statements and determination in his eyes. She thought about every struggle and triumph, every challenge overcome, every moment of joy earned through hard work and perseverance. "Thank you," she whispered, not for the first time and certainly not for the last, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for standing beside me when I had no one else, for loving me exactly as I am. "Always," Xander promised, his voice rough with emotion. "From the moment I first saw you behind that bar, determined and beautiful, until my last breath. Always." They remained there as the stars came out, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. The Silver Star might eventually close, and the ranch might someday pass out of family hands, but the story of Josephine and Xander would endure. A tale of justice and love, of a woman who fought for what was hers, and a cowboy who made sure the truth finally came out, and in doing so found everything they had both been searching for. The Wild West was harsh and unforgiving, but it also offered opportunities for those brave enough to seize them. Josephine had seized hers with both hands, had fought when fighting was necessary, had built when building was possible, and had loved when love found her. She had won every battle that mattered, not just reclaiming her business, but creating a legacy that would outlast them all. As she drifted to sleep that night, safe in Xander's arms, as she had been for nearly 40 years, Josephine Quincy smiled. She had started with nothing but determination and a dream. She had lost it all to betrayal and lies. But with the help of a steady cowboy who saw her worth and refused to let injustice stand, she had won it all back, and so much more. The Silver Star still shone, the ranch still thrived, and their love remained as bright and true as the day he had first knocked on her door and offered to help. That was the real victory, the real happy ending. Not just reclaiming what was stolen, but finding someone to share it with, someone who valued truth and justice and hard work, someone who saw strength as beautiful and determination as attractive. Victoria had tried to take everything, but in the end, she had lost. Josephine had won the business, the recognition, the respect, and most importantly, she had won a love that transformed her life from survival into something truly worth living. The truth had come out, as truth eventually does, and justice had prevailed, and they all lived happily, purposefully, and deeply in love ever after.